Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of What If Civilization Started Over. We're going to get right into it. The first thing that's going to happen in this episode is going to be the expansion of a few countries in Europe, because they're just going to keep exploring. So Russia is continuing to get bigger, which is the same thing they did in real life, but they still have not conquered past the Urals. Estonia will actually be exploring and conquering a lot of land that no one lives in yet. And they're going to make their border with Russia a little better by selling some of their land to Russia because I say so. And a lot of land will be discovered in Scandinavia as well, with the democracy going ahead and colonizing a bit of land over here. Okay, let's put some cities in this land. I'm going to do... This episode's going to have the biggest war of the whole series so far, so hopefully you guys are going to enjoy that. But some more cities will start to pop up. Actually, one probably wouldn't pop up there. I'm going to say one pops up there, just because I feel like there would be one isolated city there, but yeah. Okay, turn off ideologies, because that's not going to be important. What is important right now is the alliance layer, because one last country is going to join Libya's alliance, and that will be this former Mesopotamian country here. Their capital is actually on the border between Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, so I'll just call them Jordan. So Jordan will also be joining this war, and that does mean that a war is about to break out, and this war will be starting between Spain, or just like in Spain, because although Spain did give independence to these guys, which were who wanted to become a theocracy, they don't really recognize them as independent, and so when the next monarch comes into power, so this is only maybe a few decades after the last episode, so quite short in the span of things, and right now we're around the year 900 to 950, I'd say, in terms of the series. But Spain is going to launch an invasion into Andalusia, which is what I'm going to call the southern country, and Andalusia is going to... Technically, the purple alliance, the pink alliance is only supposed to be against Libya. These aren't NATO-style alliances, so the pink one's only against Libya. And the purple one is only supposed to be there to defend Libya. But Andalusia threatens to leave the alliance if they don't get help, so Libya starts sending help to Andalusia. And Spain basically says, hey, we should threaten them, because Spain is getting absolutely cooked, because Libya is the, I think, strongest country in the world for sure by now. And so Spain is actually losing so super badly, especially after northern France joins in. And so the leader of Spain is like, hey, we should probably stop Libya, right? Libya is trying to expand, and our whole thing is we should stop them from doing it. And a lot of the members of the Pink Alliance are like, actually, no, we don't want to do that. And so, however, the Pink Alliance will vote to go ahead and invade into Libya, so a few members will leave. Most important member that leaves is going to be Russia, who's like, we don't really want to be in this war. But some other members that leave include Turkey as well as Croatia. But the rest of the members will stay in. And they will all declare war on Libya. This includes this West African country down here. Because they want to invade, they actually want to invade into Libya. And so they will be doing that, as this is going to be one of the only fronts that actually goes well for the Pink Alliance, as Libya is just not very well defended down here. Their capital's all the way over here, and they're all the way down here. But we will also go ahead and see that Eritrea will start an invasion into Sudan, which officially brings the rest of the Purple Alliance into the war. And they are actually clobbering Sudan because they have Ethiopia. This is mostly Ethiopian forces. As they quickly encircle the Sudanese capital, as well as taking these three major cities right here. And yeah, Sudan is cooked. But they're still barely in it. Meanwhile, Libya will start their invasion of South Egypt, as North Egypt tries and fails to do their own invasion, and South Egypt will actually start an invasion into North Egypt, with it actually going really well, as North Egypt kind of is failing, and Libya is forced to prop them up, which does kick South Egypt out of North Egypt, but it forces Libya to retreat. a little bit, and they don't really get that far in this front line because they're kind of having to prop up their two allies here that are really weak. So South Egypt will stay alive for a while, but they can't help Sudan. So for now, the rest of Sudan will capitulate, and it's just the capital city of Sudan that's under siege. In Europe, things will go a bit differently, as southern France has been wanting to take out western France for a while. They sold this land to them, but they instantly regretted it. I believe, yeah, they're a monarchy, so like the next king didn't like that his father had sold that land, and they pretty quickly take these three cities. As France withdraws from here, however, Andalusia, with the support of Libya, will easily be able to take the capital of Spain, and Spain refuses to surrender until they literally have basically no land left. But now they will start helping out northern France, and with this, they'll start pushing back western France a little bit, but not enough. However, another story is Morocco, who, with the help of both Andalusia and also Morocco has just never had a capital. Their capital was supposed to be this city, so their capital is immediately taken as Libya sends troops into the desert. Actually, of all places, Cape Verde, which is still a country, they will actually capture these Balearic Islands and will purchase them from Libya, which kind of makes them join in on the war, but not really. Carthage and Rome are actually on the same side here, which is not, they had previously usually been pretty big ops of each other, but they're both very threatened by Libya, and so Carthage will start sending troops into Libya, and this is mostly Roman troops, let's be honest. Like, Carthage is not strong enough to do this on its own, although Sparta will start their invasion of Albania, which starts going pretty well, as Libya will also start an invasion of Albania over here, and Albania is almost capitulating, but they still are fighting on for now. If we look at the alliances layer, take off the alliances layer, you can see Albania is mostly capitulated. Over in South Egypt, the front, Sudan has finally collapsed, which allows Eritrea to start their invasion into South Egypt. And that means that this front line is finally broken, although South Egypt is doing a really good job of defending their important cities. So for now, there's still another new front line. But one city has been captured, and their capital is under threat, as another city is very close to being captured. But South Egypt is actually doing remarkably well for their size. So that's nice. Over in West Africa, Libya has completely abandoned their front line, and West Africa has just taken over all of the former Libyan land, and they will make a deal with Libya to annex this land. But in exchange, they will leave the Pink Alliance, and so this is already resolved. It was never a very big front line. Anyway, Morocco is starting to capitulate as Libya is moving in. Andalusia's kind of stalled because they have to occupy Spain, which is a lot of work. And in fact, they've withdrawn because Libyan army is here. And at this point, Morocco will capitulate, and the Roman Carthaginian army will start getting pushed back. As they get pushed back all the way to the city of Carthage. However, the one front where the Pink Alliance is still doing well is against Western France, as they are just kind of weak, and Andalusia is really struggling to occupy Spain. Brittany has become Western France, but a lot of the territory didn't want to be part of them. And they're struggling to hold out, but for now they're holding out in their actual core territories, which looks like this. But in a surprising move, Western France will actually invade into Spain and start liberating them. And I lost their old color, so we're just going to make this... And I lost their old color, so we're going to make this the new color of Spain. I think it's pretty much the same color. Anyway, so Spain will start getting liberated as Andalusia is really struggling. And Andalusia is, shown to be way weaker than everyone thought they were. And Libya's like, am I really going to have to bail you out? Come on. In South Egypt, they finally buckled in this city, and that's kind of led to a domino effect as their capital starts getting threatened. They have to withdraw troops from, the Western Front to start defending their capital. So that leads to all of these cities being taken, as all of a sudden, their capital is all they have left. But they're still defending it fiercely. Sudan is not there anymore. I don't know what happened to them. Something nice will happen as Brittany will kind of just have a collapse of government. They're a theocracy, but like basically a religious divide between the two. Like, okay, so these guys are a theocracy, right? But the pink religion is kind of weird in the way it's structured. Each country is kind of independent within the pink religion theocracies. But France has their leader elected by like a council of religious elders, but the French council is deadlocked as to who would be the next successor. And this is like leading to a crisis in which they literally just can't get anything done. And so they're just going to completely collapse. And the council, like, basically this country is completely collapsed. So it would be very hard to bring them back after the war, even if Libya wins. Although you never know. Libya will just probably make a puppet state there instead. Because they've kind of fully collapsed. And this has allowed these guys to start, first of all, liberating the Balearic Islands as well as pushing back in Spain. As Andalusia is really starting to struggle. And it's kind of like, how incompetent can Andalusia possibly be? And it turns out they're very incompetent. They're a theocracy like France, but they have an even less competent government structure. Anyway, the outskirts of Carthage have fallen as the final wall is being advanced upon, and therefore Rome has no way to land new troops in Carthage. So it's like the final siege, as like the coast around Carthage have been occupied, even though you can't see that. Albania has also fully capitulated at this point, as South Egypt is still about to surrender, but their king is still alive, and he's still hoping for something to turn around soon. Spain is really the only front where these guys are winning, as they capture yet another city, and Libya is forced to direct troops to help out Andalusia because they're struggling so bad. But with this happening, Andalusia will start to push back against the Allies, as it seems that a Libyan victory is all but inevitable. And these guys are kind of looking to anyone and see, like, is anyone willing to help us? And they especially go back to the three allies who left the war and are like, do you really want Libya to be this dominant over the world? And Croatia's like, we can't really do anything to stop that, I'm sorry. And Russia's like, we have other priorities, because they're kind of colonizing this land as this war is going on. So we have other priorities that's not really important to us. But Turkey is going to be like, sure, I'm probably going to regret this, let's be honest, but let's do it. And so Turkey has joined the Pink Alliance, joined back into the Pink Alliance, and this is something that, like, Libya was expecting, and they kept telling Jordan to, like, prepare for that, but Jordan was complacent, and they weren't really putting that much into the war anyway. So when Turkey begins their invasion of Jordan, it goes extremely quick, like, it's like probably within a month, as Jordan kind of surrenders also prematurely, because they don't really care about existing that much, to be honest. Like, they are a theocracy, and they did rebel away from North Egypt. They just really don't care about existing too much. They want to unite with Mesopotamia, and they're hoping that Turkey will do that, but they just, like, not only the people, but the government of this country, like, how do I explain this? It's basically a theocracy, but it's not a hardline theocracy. They don't really care about the religion that much, and therefore they just don't care about their government existing, and no one in the country really cares about their government existing. But what this does, so they just kind of surrender pretty quickly and don't really put up much of a fight. Any Mesopotamian or Jordanian armies in South Egypt are recalled, which allows for South Egypt to make a little bit of a recovery. But, yeah, and Libyan troops are not really here. They're kind of mostly fighting in Andalusia and Carthage, which is still not fallen for some reason. I should keep the alliances later on. Actually, I'll turn it off. But Eritrea is, like, basically on the border of it, as the capital of Sudan is once again under siege. But North Egypt is now being invaded by Turkish troops, as well as Jordanian troops, because, again, Jordan did not care about this war at all. Like, at this point, Jordan is given the option, like, you can be independent as long as you switch sides, and the former government of Jordan is, like, on vacation in Arabia when this happens, and they're like, oh, they want to reinstate us into government? Like, no, we really don't want that. Like, no, like, just integrate us into Mesopotamia or something. Like, they do not care about existing. And so Turkey goes to Mesopotamia and is like, hey, if you join the war on the Pink Alliance side, we will give you all of the land that we have over here. And Mesopotamia's like, yes. So Mesopotamia will join the alliance, and they were never in the Purple Alliance. This was Jordan, so now they switch. And it turns out having Jordan as an ally was pretty much the worst thing that could have happened to Libya. They were not a good ally, as North Egypt is starting to get crumbled, and they will withdraw their entire army from South Egypt. At first, this forces Libya to put their own army in, but South Egypt is able to kind of actually have some good army movements. North Egypt will be able to deflect the Mesopotamians and Turkish for a little while here, as Turkey turns their attention towards this part of Libya. However, a new thing is going to happen that's going to turn the tide of the war once again. So we have to go to the alliances layer, because I guess southern Turkey, western Turkey, I'm just going to call them western Turkey, have joined the Purple Alliance. And this is because they want to take out regular Turkey, and they pretty quickly capture the Turkish capital because it wasn't very well defended. But that's also the king wasn't in the capital, so he withdraws from Libya as Thrace is quickly taken. But they, despite what the map might say, they do not cross the Bosphorus. They do not cross the Bosphorus, despite what the map might say. But Turkey does withdraw their troops from here, which allows for North Egypt to do quite well over here. However, Turkey is now able to deal with Western Turkey as they create a siege of the fort in their capital, as the people in the capital will rise up and defeat a large portion of the Western Turkish army, and Western Turkey turns out not to have been a very big threat at all. However, what it did do is create enough of a distraction that Mesopotamia is fully pushed out of North Egyptian territory and starts getting pushed into their own territory, which allows for Eritrea to start their invasion into South Egypt, as the capital is not as besieged as it was before, but it is encircled. In Spain, Carthage has finally fallen at this point, which is a morale loss for sure, but like they knew it was going to happen, and they weren't putting any resources into defending it because they couldn't, so it's kind of just a morale loss, but not the end of the world. In Spain, there's kind of been a stalemate for a while, but eventually the monarch of Spain dies and his son inherits the throne. So at first this gives a huge boost to Andalusia as they manage to take a lot of ground, but it turns out the son is a really competent military leader, and he will turn things around, as the Libyan generals that were sent to Spain were like the worst ones, because the best ones were in Carthage and are now being moved to Egypt, as well as maybe the Turkish front, but really Egypt is their current priority. And Andalusia is militarily incompetent already, so imagine when they're fighting against an actually competent general. And by the time Libya realizes they need to send more stuff here, Andalusia has already capitulated. And Galicia is actually pissed about this, and they're like considering talking to Libya about maybe getting Libyan support to invade into Spain. And so Spain just takes them out preemptively. The Libyan armies here try to cross the Bosphorus and actually are successful, but Turkish armies push them out, and they're forced to retreat back, which is a really bad thing. And then they get chased into Thrace before the Turkish armies are forced to retreat back, which is embarrassing for them. And so both sides are embarrassed by that. But it's more embarrassing for Libya because they're supposed to be the bigger threat. Anyway, Western Turkey has their capital pretty much, and that's it. And that's pretty much it. Mesopotamia is doing a lot worse than people probably thought they would do, as North Egypt is invading into them, and South Egypt has finally capitulated. And with this, the tide of the war is going to shift again, as Libya can free of its armies, and its new current focus is Spain. The thing that happens is that they will help Galicia. The Galician family had fled. The Galician royal family had fled to Libya's capital, and so they're reestablished here, as a lot of the Galician people want to be part of Galicia, and Spain's occupation of Galicia kind of collapses. They then take the Andalusian Council and have them elect another leader of Andalusia, who's a religious leader. And this is weird because Libya's a blue religion theocracy, these guys are a pink religion theocracy. But they will start helping these guys, and notice I'm using purple and not the Andalusian color, and that's because I'm stupid. They will start helping these guys invade back into Andalusia, as they're like, Libya's army is really powerful, so even though Spain has a really good general, Galicia, as well as Andalusia and Libya, combined are going to be able to overpower Spain, even with southern France sending them support. Although for now, it's kind of going to stalemate here, which is bad for Libya because they're sending most of their army here. And what's even worse for Libya is that Western Turkey has finally capitulated. And in a kind of controversial move, Turkey will do two things. One, they will fully annex Western Turkey in the middle of the war. So Western Turkey is just gone. Second thing they will do is they will make a deal with Libya that they will basically get this territory back, as well as some apology money, and in exchange they will leave the war. So Turkey kind of just betrayed their Pink Alliance allies for national, basically, restoration. But another thing they will do is they will start abusing the pink religion population of their country. And very quickly, it will be found that the pink religion of this country has not disappeared. Like, there's probably 49% in all of these regions, if not, like, majority in some of these regions. But basically, the pink religion is dispersed throughout the country, forcibly relocated, as well as murdered or forcibly converted or naturally converted. So that Turkey is now fully yellow religion. And this is obviously condemned by a lot of countries, but it's especially condemned by Andalusia, of all places, as Andalusia basically starts getting really mad at Libya for having accepted this deal with Turkey. And they basically say, hey, Libya, like, cut that out, invade into Turkey, like, right now, or we're not allies anymore. And it's like, what are you doing? Because you're currently fighting a war in Spain. And Libya's like, absolutely not. You're pretty much my vassal. What are you doing? And Andalusia's like, okay, fine. And they just withdraw all of their troops from Spain and leave the war. And I actually have to... Galicia should be part of the Purple Alliance. But yeah, Andalusia just leaves the war. They're like, screw this. They are really mad at Libya for accepting that deal with Turkey and allowing Turkey to massacre all of their people. And Libya, being stupid, will basically send their army into Andalusia to try and invade it, and also tell Galicia to do the same. And so Spain will chase these Galician armies back into Galicia as Galicia starts an invasion into Andalusia. And Andalusia is also not being helped by Spain, as despite their allies saying, what are you doing? This is a waste of our time. Spain will also start their own invasion of Andalusia, and Andalusia will just capitulate. However, they are getting pushed back, so maybe, like, again, they probably shouldn't have been doing that. But at least it kind of reset the Spanish front lines, and it was annoying for Libya, so that's good. Libya has also completely withdrawn their focus from here, and Mesopotamia has gotten their act together, as they've started pushing back North Egypt, who's really weak. Like, they've been getting really lucky recently, but they're really weak on average. And Mesopotamia is actually quite strong, especially with the Jordanian land they just got. So the Sinai is going to fall, as well as the only major city in the Sinai. Also, Eritrea and Ethiopia are powerful, but like they're currently occupying Sudan, which has a larger population than Eritrea, as well as South Egypt, which is also really powerful. And they're really struggling to do this. And the Ethiopian people are like, why on earth are we fighting this war? We're helping out the blue religion theocracy to take over the world. And also, if you'll remember, we're kind of living under a dictatorship, not even an actual red religion theocracy. And so a lot of people in the southern parts of Ethiopia will be like, what are we doing? They will break away from Ethiopia. The Somali people will also break away from Ethiopia, establishing a democracy. These guys are establishing an actual theocracy. These guys are establishing a democracy. And immediately, these guys will start conversations with the Pink Alliance, as they will both join in the hopes of getting their liberation from Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was not expecting this. Okay. And they will begin their invasions into Ethiopia. And these will go swimmingly as the Ethiopian capital is captured because their army was not in their country, which is a bad idea usually. And with this, Sudan is going to basically start rebelling in the east against their occupation, as well as South Egypt, who kind of just is completely withdrawn from. And honestly, Sudan is also withdrawn from, as if we look at the alliances layer, these guys are just going to completely become their own separate war, as they are just like so collapsy right now that they just cannot focus on fighting alongside Libya. And this war is actually going to go pretty quick because these guys are like, we actually will give you all your land back if you recognize us. And Ethiopia, despite Eritrea's wishes, will do that. These are the ideologies of the new state. They're literally what I said they would be. And with this insane development, South Egypt is actually going to do some pretty crazy work. Let's turn off the ideologies. Pretty crazy work against Libya, as Libya is kind of collapsing now. Their government isn't collapsing, but their army is. North Egypt will officially surrender. I think Galicia is the last ally of. Actually, Galicia and Sparta are the last two allies of Libya to be left. And Galicia will be the next to fall, as Spanish troops are doing really well, and Spain basically makes a deal with the Andalusian government as they restore the Andalusian government in the lands they currently control, as well as the lands Galicia had previously controlled, and help to push Libya all the way out of Iberia before making a landing in Morocco and restoring a government. It's not the old Moroccan government, but it's a government along the same lines of the old Moroccan government. They kind of create their own regime, which means Morocco can finally have a capital, which I kept forgetting to give them, but yeah. With a lot of help from Rome and their troops, Carthage will now experience a rebellion, and Libya will officially withdraw all of their troops from here, leaving the thing to Sparta to deal with. But instead, Albania will have a revolution against Sparta as they start invading into Sparta as well as into Libyan territories. And this Libyan territory which was once Serbia, will declare independence as Serbia is recreated. At first, they're still helping out Libya, but eventually they're like, screw this, and they leave Albania, and Sparta will not receive any Libyan support as they completely fall to Albania. I'm going to erase the countries that have fallen from the Purple Alliance just so you can see that the only country that's left in the alliance is Libya, which means the alliance doesn't exist anymore. Oh, I might as well. Actually, none of the Pink Alliance countries have fallen now that Carthage and Morocco have been restored. So now is Libya's final stand as they're being invaded from all directions. South Egypt is pushing into them from the southeast. From the east, we've got Mesopotamia pushing into them. From the northeast, Albania makes a landing on Crete, as well as near their capital. From the west, the Moroccan army helps liberate a lot of their people, although they don't try to take back the Canaries. From the north, Carthage and Rome are plunging into them. And even from the south, a new Saharan revolution will take place. They take this city with them because that's like, honestly, it's mostly centered in the city despite being a lot of the Sahara. And basically, these guys just want independence from Libya and to create a new theocratic government. They have the same ideology as Libya, but they want to do it slightly differently. And at first, Libya will crack down on these guys, taking the only city they have. As they start losing more and more territory, they decide that the Green Rebellion isn't the most important thing, and so they kind of let them wreak havoc all over the Libyan country. Albanian troops are starting to march along the coast. Mesopotamian troops have taken all the land all the way up to here. South Egypt has completely cornered the Mesopotamian capital alongside the Green Rebellion, who has taken this city. Carthage has restored its land like so, and the rest of this land has been captured by Morocco, as Libya's capital is the only thing that remains. And South Egypt will finally capture the capital in the year 1000 AD, or whatever you want to say in this timeline, but I'm going to say 1000 is when Libya's capital falls, meaning this war has lasted for about 50 years. 50 to 100 years this war has lasted. And it is finally over as the world rejoices, but we need to see how this peace treaty is divided up, and all of the members of the Pink Alliance are invited. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just kind of on the alliance layer, different countries are given different amounts of power in the peace treaty, depending on how well they did in the war, as well as how powerful they are. So Rome, as the leader of the alliance, yeah, they're gonna have a relative voting power of 5. So I'm gonna draw the number 5. South Egypt did pretty well, but they were conquered for a while, so they'll have a power of 4. Same with Spain. And France never got conquered, but they also didn't really do much in the war, so they'll get 3 points. And Mesopotamia joined the war kind of late, so they'll also get 3 points. Sudan was under occupation for most of the war, so they'll get 2 points. And the same goes for Albania. I'm just going to draw them normally. And Andalusia is actually invited, but they only get 1 point, as well as Morocco and Carthage, because they were also occupied for most of the war and didn't really do much. And the Green Saharan country is also invited and gets 1 point. So let's see how this whole thing gets divided up. And also, the Pink Alliance is formally dissolved at this conference. That's like the first thing they do is like all the countries are like, we don't need the Pink Alliance, right? Like everyone agrees on that. And some countries want to keep the Pink Alliance around, but they know that like it's not necessary anymore and it's not going to do anything anymore. It's not going to function. So why have it? And so these guys had 2, right? So they get rid of the Pink Alliance. But yeah, let's see how the peace treaty looks. And I'm actually going to go through the process. So basically all the countries come to the peace process saying, hey, here's some stuff I want out of this peace treaty. And the first thing that happens is Spain's like, can we annex Galicia? And no one is opposing to that, so they will annex Galicia fully, and Galicia can't really do anything about it, as they are erased from the map. The Green Saharan country is like, why were we even inviting to the meeting? Honestly, we don't really care about this. And so they basically just outlined the lands that they, like the maximalist amount of land that they think they can control in any legitimate way. And that ends up being this amount of land. And Morocco is kind of opposed to them controlling this much land after having just formed, but everyone else is in on it, and Morocco has the same voting power as the Green Saharan country, so unfortunately, the Green Saharan country, or fortunately, or no one cares, the Green Saharan country gets all the land they want, and I'm just gonna show this, as they officially pretty much withdraw. They, like, their delegate kind of leaves the conference after that. They're like, we got what we wanted, we don't really care about anything, so they won't really have a vote after this. But they will have a capital. And the foundation of their country does lead enough people to move into what was previously a major settlement right here that it will become their second major city. Okay, the next thing that happens is that Rome, who's kind of the head of this whole thing, they basically demand that they want to have a colony in both Crete and around the old Libyan capital. And no one is opposed to them taking Crete, so they do get Crete. But South Egypt is like, we actually want to take that region, and these guys get into a fight, and they're going to need other people to decide what happens with them. So the conference says, let's table that, we'll move on. And I'm talking about the American usage of the word table. I realize that it can mean something different in the UK, I think. Anyway, the next issue up for grabs is what to do with all of this land over here that's occupied by currently Carthage and Morocco. And everyone agrees that land south of a line I'm about to draw in black, like land inside of this line, this is the line. So it's mostly Rome that claims this land, but everyone agrees that this land is either going to be Carthaginian or Moroccan, and Carthage and Morocco can't come up with a line, so Rome comes up with one for them. And they kind of say, you know, this is a pretty fair line, and Carthage will actually get more land that Morocco was otherwise occupying. And the reason Carthage gets that land is because Morocco is even weaker than Carthage is. And at this point, Morocco's delegate will also leave the conference because they don't really need anything else. And then southern France is like, hey, we're in the meeting and we've been discussing your guys' stuff, but we kind of want to talk about western France. And Spain is really the only other candidate who can get anything out of that. And they're arguing about how to divide it up. But, like, again, it's impossible for western France to even come back as a state because their state thing got so destroyed that it's like crazy destroyed that they got. First thing is that they agree that the core Brittany territories will go over here. Spain doesn't have any claim on them. And then Andalusia comes up with a compromise. Basically, they say, hey, Spain, if you give us some more territory in the south, we will back you in taking the rest of France. And Spain agrees to that deal. And France is like, hey, can we have a backer with someone else? And then Carthage goes to them and they're like, hey, if you back us getting this territory, we'll back you. And Rome is like, we kind of want that territory. So they're like, actually, we think Spain should probably get the land in France and do the Andalusian deal. But South Egypt doesn't want Rome to basically control the thing, so they start supporting France, and everyone kind of gets into an argument about this. And then Albania is like, why don't we talk about that later as well? And so then the thing moves over to the territory that used to be in North Egypt, as Mesopotamia is the next one to talk, and they basically say, we want all of the land up to the Sinai, and then we're good, and everyone's okay with that, so they take that, and then they actually leave the conference, because they have everything they want, and they don't really care about anything else. South Egypt will demand a lot of this land, and you would think they would get it, as no one else claims it, but the issue from over here is getting people angry, and Rome is like, we'll let you have that land if you agree to do this whole thing where we get all this land that Carthage currently occupies, as well as the capital and a bunch of stuff. And Egypt is like, what are you doing? Like, you don't want to divide our alliance, do you? And then Albania actually comes up with a solution. They're like, hey, we're occupying Sparta. We do not want to be occupying Sparta. We cannot possibly control these people. We do not want to commit a massacre on them. Because we are both theocracies and they're a different religion from us. We do not want to kill them the same way that Turkey killed our people. So why don't you take over Sparta and take over Greece, basically? I don't know why I keep calling them Sparta, they're Greece. Rome, why don't you take over Greece? And then in exchange, Egypt can have the territory they want. And Rome actually accepts that. So Rome will take Greece as a colony, which means Greece is no longer a country, which sucks for them, but they're not a country anymore. And Egypt gets North Egypt as well as this land over here. This land that is under the occupation color is still under question as to who's going to get it, but this land is undeniably South Egypt. Rome still contests this land. Then Sudan is like, hey, we'll back you in getting all of this land if you just give us this one city right here, and also that's all we want out of this war anyway. And actually, surprisingly, South Egypt accepts the laws of that city because they kind of really want to have good relations with Sudan, which they kind of didn't have before the war. And they also are pleased to see Sudan basically say, okay, that's all we cared about, we're leaving the conference, because now a lot of this land is uncontestedly Southern Egyptian, which is making it more and more awkward for Rome to have a colony which is going to make it more and more awkward for Rome to have their colony here. And it basically would guarantee, and Southern Egypt is like, this will guarantee, if you take this colony right here, this is going to guarantee animosity between us for the foreseeable future. And South Egypt, and now we can actually get to voting. So Albania is still at the conference despite not really having anything else they want to do. 10 votes, which are Andalusia, Spain, and Rome, vote for Spain getting this territory. 8 votes, which are southern France, Carthage, and southern Egypt, vote for France getting this territory. However, if Albania, who's still at the conference, were to vote that France gets this territory, then it would be a deadlock. And that is the only reason that Albania supports Spain getting it. Albania would prefer for France to get it. That would be better for them. But they support Spain getting this territory just because they don't want a deadlock, and that is even worse. And so, unfortunately, for France, this territory will go to Spain, although Spain, because France is so afraid of their capital being so close to being sieged, they will give a little bit of land to France over there in exchange for some, they basically sell it after it's already acknowledged that they have it. After this, then Andalusia will leave the conference, as well as Albania and southern France. Spain, Rome, Carthage, and Egypt are left, and they have to discuss these two territories. Rome is still campaigning for a colony here, but at this point, everyone else is like, this is stupid, just give that land to Carthage, like, what are you doing? And so they don't really have a choice. But now they kind of hate everyone. Rome really thought they should, drastically expand from this war, because they were kind of funding the whole thing, and it almost bankrupted them. So they're like, can we at least have, this colony here that we were talking about, or this here? And actually, Spain decides that they're going to back Rome in taking this land here if Egypt gets this, and Egypt obviously also does that. And Carthage is complaining, but everyone else wants Rome to take this territory. So Carthage is going to throw a hissy fit about it, and they're actually going to leave the conference because they're just so upset about it. But Spain is like, actually, we don't care what happens with that last territory, and so I can erase everyone because it's just Rome and Egypt arguing over who gets this territory. But eventually, they come up with a solution of creating a neutral buffer state. Libya actually has decided that Libya will preserve and stay, as their old government is even invited, kind of as like a humiliation thing, but also because they couldn't decide who gets their capital, as Libya is actually preserved in this very small land over here. I've got some ideologies to erase, I believe. Okay, and this is the official world map, or Mediterranean map after that war. Okay. That's all that's going to happen in the west, but some more stuff is going to happen in the east. Kind of not very important stuff. I'll do some more important stuff in East Asia next episode, because I feel like I did India last episode, and then this episode was mostly about the west. So, anyway, Arabia is going to get overconfident and basically declare that Oman is abusing their people or something. And they try an invasion of Oman. But Yemen accuses Arabia of abusing their people, which they definitely did, and Yemen starts an invasion. But honestly, Oman probably didn't even need this, as the Omani military decisively defeats Arabia, showing that Arabia is big but not strong. And this is actually, technically, this is when Jordan is still existent and fighting. This is actually before a lot of that happens. Mesopotamia, actually, this is probably why Mesopotamia was strong enough. They invade, and Arabia is like, you know what, you guys suck, and they surrender really early. And this is what the peace treaty looks like at first, but Arabia realizes after a little while they're not going to be able to control this territory, and so they sell it over to Persia. And Persia is actually getting strong despite how badly they lost in episode 10. They've slowly been gaining in power ever since, and they hope to one day recover. This southern Indian country will basically try to invade into the central Indian country. I need to come up with better names for these countries. And they'll do decently well, and so, these guys will sue for peace. And like, no major events happened in the rest of the world during that 50-year-long war, but some minor events did happen. Like, these guys have like a horrible economic crisis and go bankrupt, and in order to get out of it, they start selling their land to everyone. And so they're going to shrink on the map, but they're not actually getting that much less powerful. But all 4 of their neighbors will buy land from them. This is like kind of stuff you don't need to know. Actually, something decently important does happen, which is that North India is a religious mess. I'm convinced there's no good colors for this. We're going to choose this color. These guys will rebel, and India is in the middle of an economic crisis themselves, so they can't afford to stop this. There's kind of just an economic crisis going on in the East, driven by the war in the West, because the war in the West is bankrupting everyone in the West, but the war kind of takes precedence over that. These guys don't have a war to distract them from the economic crisis. So that'll happen. Actually, one of the major things we're going to see in this episode is a ridiculous amount of exploration, because I feel like that definitely would have happened by now. I've been recording for over an hour, I believe, so I need to wind this down soon. I think I've been recording for an hour and a half, actually. But yeah, most of Indonesia, as well as the rest of the Philippines, will be discovered. And a new Indonesian country will pop up from explorers from this country who don't want to live in this country anymore. And this will be like a burgundy-colored country. And it will also take up a decent portion of the island of Borneo. These guys will be able to do this because a few new cities have started forming. So a lot of cities form outside of empires, and then a few cities also form inside of empires, one of which is these guys' capital. Ideology-wise, these guys are a monarchy. That's kind of the reason they revolted, but they also just kind of didn't want to be part of Vietnam, but they also kind of wanted a secular government. China will colonize the rest of the Philippines, as well as the northern half of Borneo. Okay, and then the last thing that happens this episode, actually, is that southern Japan will conquer the Shikoku Rebellion that rebelled from them a little while ago, as they are removed from the map. We turn off ideologies so you can actually see this. They are fully annexed by South Japan, who then turns their sights onto Hokkaido. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.